I don't know how many of you watched a certain video I made early last year, but in said video I talked about my least favourite secondary, the Manmelter. I essentially, in a nutshell, complained about how bad it is and slammed it as a terrible weapon. I guess you could say I didn't like it, huh? Well, I'm sorry to say this, but past BonOakley was dumb. As a main of any class, you're expected to have a vast knowledge of the weapons they use and different tactics for a variety of combos.
Oh wow, you're so smart!
Clearly past me didn't have much knowledge with the Manmelter, as after collecting all the broad-bore pyro weapons in strange collector's quality, I started to play around with said set again, and surprise surprise, I really enjoy the Manmelter now. The Manmelter is a neat side grade that really has a lot of uses that I didn't see last time. I talked about the infinite ammo not being very useful before, and while I stand by that fact since I last said more experienced pyros will know how to use the ammo well, there's plenty of upsides to it. First off, you never have to worry about finding ammo packs for it. Therefore, if you run out of primary ammo, you'll have two weapons to fall back on rather than just a melee if the secondary ammo also has been depleted. Next, I talked about how its 50% faster projectile speed wasn't very helpful, if at all, which couldn't be further from the truth looking back. While not very effective up close, it's pretty darn good against enemies that are too far for you to safely walk up to. The faster projectile will likely throw them off due to most people being used to the speeds of every other flare gun. This is also a pretty nice stat to have to make up for no random crits. And again, while I bash on the alt fire extinguishing people, it is pretty damn good when there's an enemy pyro. If you're quick enough to react, you can grab a ton of crits for it to use at will, and since you have crits on demand for that, you can absolutely demolish light health classes and a couple of meteor classes with a couple of shots. I may have put this down before, but combined with the Phlogistinator and the crit meter that has, you can go on a huge killing spree and be very helpful towards your team, especially when you're gaining crits non-stop and a nice 20 health per crit gained when extinguishing with the Manmelter. So now that I think that it's actually a good weapon after using it for quite a while now, how does it stack up towards the other flare guns in my opinion? Let's of course start with the stock flare gun. Compared to this, there is certainly ups and downs for each one. The stock flare gun allows you to get random crits and crits against already burning enemies, which the Manmelter cannot do due to no random crits and just not having the ability to do more damage to already burning enemies. However, it does hold up by having its projectile travel faster and the fact that you can shoot crits on demand if you have them stored, making it effective against those who aren't burning, such as pyros. So the Manmelter can certainly hold its own against the original. What about the Detonator? Well, the Detonator has guaranteed mini crits against burning players. However, if you're playing in a more supportive role, the Manmelter can land you multiple guaranteed crits. This is of course if you're able to extinguish teammates, so really it depends on the situation. The one upside the Detonator has here though is the fact that it does more damage if they're already on fire, whereas the Manmelter will always do the same amount of damage regardless. The Detonator also has a minus 25% damage penalty, which compared to the full 30 damage the Manmelter does every time, the Detonator can only deal around 22 to 23. However, like previously stated, the Detonator deals mini crits to those already on fire, so it kinda makes up in that department. And finally, the Detonator does plus 50% damage to the user. This is due to the Detonator being a decent flare jumping utility, whereas the Manmelter doesn't have any damage penalties to the user. The main difference here is that the Manmelter is more of a team support type of flare, whereas the Detonator is more useful against crowds and reaching up to higher places. So overall, it depends on what playstyle and situation you're in and going for. And finally, last but not least, the Scorch shot. The Scorch shot, just like the Detonator, has guaranteed mini crits against burning players. Basically, what I said about it on the Detonator can be said here. The Scorch shot also does knockback on enemies and does even more on burning players. It also explodes when hitting the floor, which can set multiple people alight if they're close enough. This can be helpful when trying to deny a push and for damaging multiple enemies, just like the Detonator. However, like previously said there, the Manmelter is certainly more useful when extinguishing players, and the stored crits are great for surprising a low health enemy, or in general, since they won't expect a whopping 90 damage from a flare straight away. The Scorch shot also has a minus 35% self-damage force attribute, which is significant in flare jumping as it will not push the player as high up as the Detonator, but still more than the normal flare gun and Manmelter since they do not have the same abilities as those two. And for the final downside is a minus 35% damage penalty, taking the damage down to around 20 compared to the Manmelter's 30. So, like the Detonator, it really depends on the situation for what suits best. And really, that can be said for any of them. However, it's pretty clear that the Manmelter can definitely stand on its own and can be useful for support and other helpful situations. It can then be a pretty good surprise attack when you have crits stored, seeing as how they won't be expecting a whole 90 damage from out of nowhere. granted that you can aim. So overall, I feel like I overlooked the Manmelter when I first gave it a look at, and having a second go with it, I can easily see the appeal of it now. But don't take my word for it, here are a couple of guests to give their thoughts on the Manmelter too. So, take it away, guys.
I think the Manmelter is kind of in the same class of weapons as like the Wangaprick. It's a weapon that a lot of people use for like 5 seconds and then everyone just forgot about. But it's actually a pretty good weapon, you know? It's a good substitute for how you use the flare gun, except it's kind of the reverse, where instead of you lighting people on fire to get crits, you extinguish people to get crits. And I think that's actually really good. It promotes team play. Too bad its sister weapon can't fucking air blast. Nice job, Valve. You did it.
The Manmelter is a alright weapon. I actually don't mind it that much. I don't see why people don't really use it as well. I think it's a decent weapon. I guess it's because the flare gun is better in every way, shape and form, but the Manmelter is in this state where it's like, it's not overpowered or underpowered, it's just there. It just exists. If you're going to use this weapon, I recommend comboing it with the Phlogistonator. They were part of the set, and to be honest, they do go well together because you can still extinguish teammates because the Phlogistonator can't air blast, while with the Manmelter, extinguish it and trades off for crits. Again, the flare gun is pretty much better in every way, shape, and form, but if you want to run a Phlogistonator and still want a flare, then the Manmelter is a good choice. But I would also say if you want to get it to be used a bit more, I would probably change it so it also works on Jarate wet players. So like Jarate and Mad Milk and all that. And this is a bit of a stretch. I don't think they should do it because I think it'll be a bit too overpowered, but if people still think that's still too situational, then maybe also do it with stickies, because there's normally always a demo on the other team. And of course it's up in the air if you actually use the stickies, you could be using a shield, but really, it's a good weapon. It's not as bad as some people say it is. It's not overpowered, it's not underpowered, it just exists, and if you're using the Phlogistonator or like using it, then I recommend bringing this flare gun. It will probably help you out and make your teammates feel happy that they actually have a pyro that extinguishes them. Because, you know, pyros don't actually do that.
In my opinion, the Manmelter compared to the flare gun is like saying that the flamethrower is more effective than the degreaser. The Manmelter in my mind is the weapon I never use, and I probably wouldn't use it.
The Manmelter is the pure definition of an underappreciated weapon. Sure, it doesn't give crits on demand as easily as the normal flare gun does, but all you have to do to store up crits is extinguish allies. Not only does that save air blast ammo, that gives you crits to use against anybody, even enemy pyros, easily without having to flare punch. You can also crit people at any range, which is easier mind you because of the faster projectile speed, and not need to have them on fire. The fact that you can crit anybody without having them on fire, without needing to light them, is a massively underappreciated aspect of this weapon, and effectively makes it a really good flare sniping weapon.
So to me, the Manmelter is a bit of a mixed bag. I like the concept and everything, but I do think it gets underused quite a lot, especially because extinguishing with a secondary does not come off as a useful tactic sometimes. Most pyromans will just end up extinguishing with their primary because they're so used to doing that, and really you get more of a useful benefit out of that, because yes, you can get crits for extinguishing teammates. Because of the projectile speed being a bit faster, your aim can kind of get thrown off if you're so used to using, say, the flare gun, which to me already makes me not want to use the weapon. The only other benefit I'd say is that it has no ammo, but even then you should always have access to ammo anyway, so to me this benefit is not too useful. I know I probably went over 30 seconds, I just kind of had a lot to go over in this time. I'm so sorry, Bon. Thank you for having me on, however. Bye-bye.
Hey guys, it's your favorite turret building mining man Mekarek here, and today BonOakley has asked for me to share my opinions on the Manmelter, a secondary weapon for pyro. Now when it comes down to pyro secondaries, shotgun is always best. But if we're talking about the flare guns, it's kind of a weird bag. I mean, there's the flare gun, which is for damage, the Scorch shot, which is for splash and utility, and then there's detonator for splash and mobility. But then there's the Manmelter, which seems the most supportive out of them all. Like, you get critical hits from extinguishing people, and the flare is faster. I think it's trying to compensate for something. But to be 100% honest with you, it's really the black sheep out of all the flare guns. Out of every single pyro that I've ever seen in my entire life, the only people that I've seen run a flare gun is normally the flare gun and the Scorch shot. I've never really seen many people run the detonator in Manmelter, and they're really good. I mean, not as good as immediate damage and utility as the Scorch shot and flare, but it's still good. As for me personally, I don't really play pyro that often, but whenever I really do use a flare gun instead of a shotgun, I definitely either use the Manmelter or the flare gun myself. But all in all, back to the Manmelter, it's just your average pyro secondary that isn't really that interesting.
Thank you to UnusualSandwich, Mistress Sami, Minty Coffee, Siomo, Mekarek and Krimsxn for their thoughts, both negative and positive, about the Manmelter. Everyone's link will be in the description so you can check out their channels too. And thanks to everyone for watching. I feel like the Manmelter is a fairly good flare gun now, so I advise you all to give it a go if you're still unsure about it like I was. And as always, this has been your Fem Pyro enthusiast BonOakley, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.
Here's some of the awesome art you kind people have made. Man, look at the size of those things!
Oh, hello! Thank you for watching this production! Consider watching another one of them above us! Now if you excuse me, I have to get back to work.